Hello, and welcome, beautiful souls. Thank you for joining me here today on the Heart of the Soul podcast. My name is Amana, and I am so happy that you're here. This is a space where we explore what it means to be wild women walking upon this earth. Together, we connect through the ancient ritual of storytelling, often sharing about that which is unseen and unspoken. It is my hope that soaking in these stories may inspire you to uncover your own innate knowing and center you into a more embodied and alive version of your beautiful, unique self. Today is Saturday, November 22nd, 2025, and our moon is currently waxing towards our next full moon in Gemini on December 4th. I am super excited to have Sømmer-Rae Nies here with me today through the cosmos on Zoom. Although we haven't met each other in the flesh, we currently live in the same state of Washington and know women that swim in the same circles. We must really have the numbers down here today, because like when you sent me a voice message, it was like the 222, and now here we are 1122, and I just think it's so fun. And that Gemini is the next full moon, and you're a Gemini, right?
I have a Gemini stellium. I'm like all Gemini.
Yes. Okay. So Summer, I would love for you to just introduce yourself a little more in whatever way feels good to you. And I know I read that you're a third generation Norwegian here, and anything you want to share there.
Totally.
Yeah.
I hope to get more into that part of myself or my ancestry. But yeah, so my name's Sømmer-Rae Nies. I live in Seattle, and we have a greenhouse here that I manage, and I do photography and floral work. And I'm a mother of two sweet beings. And yeah, my husband's a carpenter. We like to build stuff. I'm kind of always busy doing something. I play music in a band, and yeah, Gemini with Gemini stellium, lots of Gemini energy. So I have lots of air and keep busy with kind of doing stuff around the house. And yeah, I'm super happy to be here. Thanks for asking me to be on this podcast. It's just nice to have like a conversation sans children once in a while, at least.
Yeah. The interruptions, I know us mothers, we can like flow in and out of dialogue when we have to with our littles, but it also is so nice to get to connect with you in this way. I'm curious for you. So you live in Washington. Did you grow up in Washington? I haven't asked you some of these questions.
Yeah, I know, right? We're just like getting to know each other a little bit. So third generation Norwegian, my grandparents, specifically on my dad's side, Norwegian grandparents on both sides, but my dad's side, my great-grandfather's name was Simon, and my maiden name is Simonsen. So when they came over from Norway, they came and they moved, I think first settled in North Dakota and then moved to Mercer Island randomly. And we're one of the first to homestead on Mercer Island, and was given the last name Simon's son of Simon. So my grandpa, Arnie, Simon's son, was, one of the first to move on to Mercer Island with his dad, Simon, and they built two houses together on a pretty big. They ended up parsing it off and selling it as time went on. But my uncle still lives on Mercer Island in the house that my great-grandfather built that I grew up in.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's super special. Yeah. And so I grew up on Mercer Island, and then my parents got divorced, and my mom moved to Issaquah when there was like farms and everything out there. We were like out in the country, is what it felt like, which it doesn't feel like that anymore, really. But, and then my dad ended up staying in Seattle and then meeting a lady from Trinidad and moving down to Florida. So I moved down. I was a lot closer with my dad. So I would when I tell people, about where I grew up, it's that I grew up in Miami and South Beach, Miami. And then the other half of the time I was up here in like Seattle area, Issaquah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I grew up on the Kitsap Peninsula, so like across the water from Seattle. My
Cool.
mom grew up in like shoreline area,
Mm.
and actually her mother's ancestry is from Sweden and Finland, and they came to Seattle. Her, her mother's mother, they came and they actually had like a Finnish spa, like a Finnish, not spa, oh my gosh, a Finnish sauna in
Mm.
Seattle. Like there's like a picture of their Finnish sauna like in like
Dude,
downtown
that's the dream.
Seattle from, but it's not there anymore, but they had it years ago, and it's so neat to like look at these photos of ancestors that were living in the area. And
So cool.
my mom was actually born where like I-5 and I-520 or whatever,
Mm.
before 520 was built. There was a house there, and my mom was born like in that house. My grandmother had an unintentional, unassisted birth that birthed my mom
Cool.
on the steps inside the house as my grandpa was like putting his pants on. And yeah, so it's fun that you also have ancestors in the area.
Totally. I know there's lots of Scandinavian culture here.
Yes.
But yeah, we're like, I'm really getting my kids into like these Scandi dances that happen. They happen twice a month. And so we're going to go to our first one tomorrow, actually. But yeah, just been doing lots of research on like how I can bring forth more of that Scandi culture because
Yeah.
it feels alive in me and it was living in me when I was a child because I was raised mostly by my grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they're, full blood Norwegian, like very
Yeah.
Norwegian, even though I think that there was like this kind of stigma around like, oh, we moved to America, we must be American now, which
Mm-hmm.
makes me feel a little sad. So I'm just like trying to bring forth that like,
Yeah.
without like the things that like I don't like lutefisk and stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah. Have
Like
you been
I'm
to?
not into like the fish, but I like love the clothing and the dances and the music and the language
Yeah.
and the pastries and yeah.
Yeah. Have you been to Paulsbo?
I've been to Poulsbo, but are you going to tell me that there's like some Norwegian thing going on over there?
Well, they have Viking Fest every year.
Oh, cool.
So they
I've
do
heard of
that
it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've heard of the Viking
festival.
Fest.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So that could be good. So, okay, speaking of ancestors, I'm curious, for you, would you be willing to tell some about your own birth story? And if you know any of birth stories beyond that, you're welcome to share those as well.
Totally. I will say that I am like not actually I'm not talking with my mom and like haven't since I was
Mhm.
young. I like was kicked out when I was around 17, just turned 17. And so and I had a really tricky relationship with my mother
Mhm.
even before then. So yeah, what I do know about my birth is kind of from my dad.
Mhm. Yeah, the
And
stories
and
he told
I
you.
guess what was that?
The stories that he told you about.
Yeah, totally. Like him, getting the call while he was at work. And I do remember my mom telling me like her version of it was that it was very traumatic and
Mm.
that for her it was like I would just not come out.
Mm.
But it's so interesting, especially hosting Village Prenatal and even seeing women in this birth space that are like maybe more aware. Like there's still often is that feeling that like when will this baby come out? So like
Yeah.
I would be surprised if she didn't say that. But I know that I was literally pulled out with forceps.
Aw.
I know that she had like an episiotomy and I know that she had an epidural.
Mhm. And you were
Um
drugged up. Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's a nurse, who works in the ER. She's worked all over the place, but just generally, like, she's not like a home nurse. She works in the hospital.
Mhm.
And that's just like her lifestyle. Like, would love to say that I was birthed at home or something. My children will get to say that, which I'm so
Yeah.
happy about. But yeah, I know that much. And I know that I was a really easy baby, is what I'm told by everyone. And
Mhm.
my grandparents on both sides really did raise me. And so there's just tons of videos, like the grandparent energy is like they're available, they have time, they're really attentive. And I got so much of that love and I'm so grateful for it. And I got lots of videos and film
Mm-hmm.
images of me, like waving to people and just being really jolly and happy.
Aw.
So that's awesome. But yeah, I think I had, according to my parents, kind of a tricky birth. Like it was hard to get me out, like I was stuck or something, I think was the
Interesting.
narrative.
Yeah, those stories, it is so interesting. The stories of like being stuck or taking too long or any of those things when it's like under what sort of context or timeline are we talking about here? Long
Well,
compared to who?
totally. And it's also so interesting because like I say that there's like a lack of awareness because when I tell my one of my birth stories or either of my birth stories, like I
Mm-hmm.
take onus and like that this is our dance that we're doing together versus
Mm-hmm.
like you were stuck and you wouldn't come out, so I had to get cut open or whatever.
Yeah.
It's very different. Yeah, that just speaks
Yeah.
to like more of that relationship, but but
But
yeah,
yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
I think about that a lot too when it comes to women sharing their birth stories.
Mm-hmm.
Like
The
it's
way that we share our stories can tell us a lot about our relationship with the story
totally
and also one of my somatic teachers, she talks about story following state. So like when your nervous system state changes, the story then changes.
totally
And for myself too, also like across time, stories change. Like the way that I told my birth story of my first, 10 years ago is different than the way that I share that story now.
totally. Yeah, that's so cool. I love storytelling. It's such a big part. I'm like a Waldorf teacher too. I didn't mention that in my intro, but
Mm-hmm.
that's been a huge part of my life, being a Waldorf teacher, and stories are the curriculum. So, like telling stories and actually living in the present moment of the story that you're telling, and kind of the art, kind of, I guess, perfecting or mastering the art of storytelling is like really important to me. And, at every village prenatal, there's a birth story shared. Like, I literally could just only speak in story for the rest of my life and be totally happy.
Oh, that's awesome. And yeah, it's a practice and it's something that I continue to practice. And sometimes
Totally.
I feel like things flow better than other times. I like fumble through it or whatever, but that's part of the practice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it was like the beginning of language too for humans to like,
Yeah.
start wanting to talk to each other is to tell each other
Mm-hmm.
stories. And it came after music. I don't
Yes, and the
know.
way that
Yeah,
we learn, and learning through the stories as well. They're not told
totally.
just for the entertainment, they're told for the lessons and wisdom woven within.
Totally.
Yeah. So, will you take us to wherever motherhood or your motherhood journey begins for you, where you like to start?
Totally. Yeah, so my mother actually had two children when I was 15 and 16.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was their mother, really. I raised them in a lot of ways. I slept in the same room as them and took care of them at night
Oh,
and
wow.
would come home and, pick them up from our neighbor's house. And my mom worked a lot and her partner worked a lot. And yeah, I remember that time, those like 2 years ish that I was living at home still and taking care of them and thinking like, I don't ever want to do this. This is so much work to have babies. And it was around that time too that I was actually told by one of my Western medicine doctors that I could never get pregnant. So
I know
I
so many women who have been told that going on
know,
to
right?
have all sorts
I
of babies.
know.
Yeah.
It's insane. And it was merely due to the fact that like I had a really late, like my cycle didn't come until I was like a junior in high school. So I was like 16
Mm-hmm.
and my cycle was like super irregular. Like I got it twice a year and I was like super duper active. I did ballet and played soccer and softball and ran track and so I think, all of these things probably played a part in my cycle being a little bit irregular, but
Mm-hmm.
I was told that. And so that just literally stuck with me. It even is a little bit still stuck with me that I can't
Mm-hmm.
have kids. It's like ingrained a little bit into my inner narrative around getting pregnant or having children.
Hmm.
So yeah, I, was kicked out, started doing my own thing. I actually moved in with my uncle back into the house that I grew up in, and went to Cornish, went to an art school and studied photography and printmaking and painting and music and dance. And I was just set to be an art teacher and never have children. And I wanted to be around children, but I just always felt like it was going to be too much for me to like have babies and to raise them.
Hmm.
And so I just lived a very independent life and living in the city and, doing art stuff. And then had different various partners, and it was always like a prerequisite. Like, you don't want to have kids, right? Because like I can't get pregnant. But at this time I was like going to acupuncture and like not seeing a Western medicine doctor anymore, but still like
Mhm.
that was in the back of my mind.
And like, did you know your cycle, like when you were fertile, or were you like using protection, or were you just like, I can't get pregnant, so
I was using protection like most of the time,
uh-huh.
but I was literally bleeding like twice a year at this time in my
Okay.
life. Like, it
Uh-huh.
wasn't until I really, since about a year ago, got my cycle back after my son was born. So
Yeah.
like a year postpartum, that like my cycle has been regular.
Mm-hmm.
Before even my daughter, I still wasn't getting like I wasn't bleeding for
Okay.
more than twice a year.
Wow.
Um, but yeah, I didn't know when I was fertile. I
Uh-huh.
didn't know
Uh-huh.
anything. I was
Okay.
like,
Okay.
I'm one of those weird like hybrid humans where like, I don't bleed or whatever. And I went on birth control once in my life, and that was the worst. I like gained 40 pounds, and like, I mean, I don't know if it was actually 40. It was like 25, 30 pounds, really. But
Yeah.
like, I'm 5'3", and my boobs got huge, and I was just so like down all the time. But I did that to like try and help my cycle.
Uh-huh.
That's
But
what I was told.
it didn't.
And
Yeah.
no, didn't do anything. It just made me like, after 3 months, I was like, I need to get this taken out. Otherwise, like, I'm actually going to just like fall off the face of the earth and like never come back. I was
Yeah.
just
So many people
unhappy.
don't know that like depression is one of those big things that comes
Totally.
with birth control. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And so, yeah, I went through a couple really big relationships that taught me a lot and were just mirrors of my upbringing, pretty much. Like, I was looking for comfort and trying to right the wrongs that I kind of went through in my childhood. And
Mm-hmm.
once separating from those, I had like a good couple years of being alone, which before that time, like, had never been alone in my life. I'd kind of like always needed a guy to help me with whether a living situation or, just to feel like secure, stable. And they were always the wrong ones. But I, after like 2 years of kind of being single and doing a lot of traveling in South America and Thailand and all of these different places. I lived in San Francisco for a little bit. I was like, okay, I feel like I'm ready to like meet this person, and I started manifesting all about him, like writing to him and getting super detail oriented, and every night I would like write him a letter and be like, "Oh, I just love the way that you're like this or like that." And then that year I started my Waldorf teaching job. And so I took a class. I had known them from kindergarten, but I took them from first grade. And the goal was that I was going to take them through eighth grade, because that's how like Waldorf schools work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like taking on this first grade class and like, okay, these are my babies. Like, I still can't have kids, so I'm not going to, but yeah, gone through like the whole master's program with Waldorf education and stuff, and it was just, and still am very into it. And so, yeah, dedicated my life to that for a couple years. And then when I was in the second grade, met my husband, and I, like totally different relationship than I'd ever had before. It was very healthy, very healing and nourishing. And I mean, within like a couple months, we were like ready to be engaged, and we got married within the first year of meeting. So my class was there. It was like the best wedding. It was in a circle in the mountains where we had our first date, picking huckleberries. And yeah, it was a beautiful ceremony. And then And then 2 months later, on Christmas Day, I conceived Love Day, my daughter, in our new house that we had just bought, that we had just that day moved into as well. Yeah. Okay, wait, Amana, you're still on mute, I think.
Hey,
Okay, there you go.
hear me now? Yeah.
Yeah, we had like Airbnb'd our house for a year before moving in. And so we had
Mhm.
bought it a year prior, like right after we met, pretty much. And then, yeah, moved in on Christmas Day and we like conceived this baby. But I didn't know until like March of 2020, which was like COVID. I like found out a week before COVID.
Wow.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah,
yeah.
because you were used to not bleeding that often, right? So you just
No.
were like, yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you uncover that you had a little wombling
I
growing?
know. Well, because my cycle was so weird, I always had pregnancy tests like on hand because I didn't ever know. And I wanted to always, I was like kind of always paranoid a little bit, like, like it could happen if I'm not bleeding for like 8 months or 9 months or 10 months, like I'm just gonna take a test. And so it hadn't been that long, but I remember my boobs being really sore and like that kind of felt weird. Like that had never really been a thing for me before. And I had some old pregnancy tests on hand. And so I remember early one morning I woke up and it was before school. So I was like, it was like 5 a.m. or something. And my husband would always wake up early too. And I went to the bathroom and I peed in a jar and I put the stick in and I took it out and I just left it there on the counter. And I'm like, okay, when I get up and get ready for school, like I'm just gonna look at it and it's not gonna say I'm pregnant. But like by this time, I'll say too that my husband and I, like since we met, we're just having unprotected sex like all the time. Because
Hmm.
I'm just like, you're the one. And if something like that did happen, like great, but also scary because I really never fathomed that that could happen. Like, yeah, I think it was literally like kind of a movie. Like, I thought that, like, oh my God, I'm gonna, test and maybe see if I'm pregnant, but it's like not real. Kind of like a movie isn't real.
Yeah, yeah.
That was in my head. It was ingrained in me that I could not have kids because, yeah,
Uh-huh.
it was told to me like every time I went to the doctor.
Yes, but then so interesting that you had pregnancy tests, like
I know because I was just
to
like,
confirm the theory that you couldn't, like.
totally. And honestly, like to be totally honest, I really didn't want to be. Like I was scared because I thought that that would like end my life or I thought that like that would be so much work. There's no way I could keep teaching or it would
Mhm.
be so much work like I can't go backpacking. I can't do, all of these things that I really love to do, my photography, my et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, so I took this test, I left it there. My husband got up and he saw it and he grabs it and he runs in and I'm still sleeping. And he's like, "You're pregnant." And I'm like, "No, I'm not." Like, and then I looked at it and I was like, "No, I'm not pregnant. That says I'm not pregnant." And he like goes in and he grabs the box and he's like, "No, that's if this line is here or whatever." And I'm just like,
Yeah.
whoa. And like literally it was like as if like a pile of stars just like landed on me and like I had the heaviest, most like glittering, sparkling feeling ever. I was just like, this is the greatest gift that I've ever been given. And that was like, yeah, the week before, it was like, in really early March. So by
Hmm.
that time I was like, what? Like close to 2.5 months pregnant.
Hmm.
And I remember I went to school and I just felt like I had to tell my class because like honestly, like those children were like my best friends. Just like I
Oh.
can't there's no way I could like keep anything. I remember when I got engaged, like I came to school and I
Hmm.
was like wearing my ring and one of the little girls were like, "Miss Simonson, like you're wearing a ring. Are you getting married?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's not that big of a deal." And like all of the girls like burst out into like cheering, like everyone was like so excited. They're like, "You have to have a wedding." I'm like, "Oh no, I'm not gonna have a wedding." Like I'm so subdued like that. Like I don't like attention really on me, I'm just like,
Yeah.
and they're like, "No, you're having," it was like for the next like week, it was like they were drawing my wedding, they were planning my wedding, they were talking. So that's why they were the only ones at my wedding because they were just so pumped. I was like, I have to tell them I'm pregnant. But
Yeah.
I told our head of pedagogy, which is kind of like our dean of the school first, and she was like, you cannot tell anyone. And I was like, okay. So I didn't, which I still regret because, then COVID happened and we all had to go home and all of the lesson for the rest of the year was on Zoom. And that
Mm,
was like really, really hard. And I had to like tell the children on Zoom. And then the parents got really upset because they're like, you're not, yeah, it was just the parents, like just in general during that
mhm,
whole rest of the year. Like that is
mhm,
a whole nother story for a different day, but just very, very negative. And my
mhm,
pregnancy was like intertwined in that. And I feel like if I would have maybe, who knows, but if I feel like if I could
mhm.
have like told them in person, maybe it would have been a little bit better, or they could have felt more empathy because I was really, really sick. And I don't need to keep going into it, but yeah, I was so sick and it was just really hard, but
Mm,
mostly because
yeah.
it was my life was like online teaching and I'm like so not anti like I hate technology, but I'm just like not good with technology and don't want to be good at it. And so
Well, it wasn't the job that you had like signed up for. Like you
Waldorf
were,
is very anti-technology, actually, and
yeah.
it's like so about physical experiences and practical application
Mhm.
of things. And, especially in third grade, it's all about farming and making our own food and sewing and, building shelter and stuff like that. And it was just really hard to perform as a teacher online.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'm with the whole cultural thing of like don't tell people you're pregnant, like is just I'm definitely one of those women like changing that, doing it differently, like told
Uh,
even coworkers and stuff when I was just a few weeks pregnant, like I was not
totally.
the person to wait. Um,
It felt like a lie for me too, because I
yeah.
felt so sick. And it felt like a lie to like not tell. They're like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "Nothing." Like, blah. You know, like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm really bad at lying, and it feels like I'm lying when I don't tell someone something
Mm.
that's like really big. But I understand why women wouldn't if, they want to keep
Right.
their feelings and
Yeah,
sensibilities to them around that if they know that it would be a big thing for them to
totally.
change.
I
Like,
just I just don't like the expectation that society has that we won't tell. Like if
oh,
women want to
totally.
choose not to tell, totally. Like you choose to tell or not tell. But to have like the society at large be like, you shouldn't tell people,
These are the rules. Yeah,
right? No,
totally. Same.
I don't live inside the box.
Totally. I know. Yeah. And I could like tell early with one pregnancy and then later with the other. Like, I don't think that
Yeah.
there should be any way of going about things because it really is not even like under our control. Like these babies, these
Mhm.
spirits, like have their own minds or ways of, working out the way everything should work. And it all works out perfectly all the time. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's the cool thing. We're trying to get pregnant again. And the cool thing I love to think about, especially in this early conception phase, is like,
Mhm.
how is this baby working with me right now? Like, when are they choosing to be conceived? Like, how is their pregnancy with me going to go as we like move through this? Like, who's going to know at what time? Like, where am I going to be working? Who am I going to
Yeah.
be working with? What am I going to be doing? All of these
Yes.
things.
Absolutely. And yeah, I've also supported women who didn't tell people that they were pregnant and then had an early birth or miscarriage. And then it's like, then they are telling people, but then they struggle with regret of not having told people earlier. And of course, it can go both ways, but that's just one aspect where women can really suffer sometimes from not sharing the truth. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I'm someone who just likes to be witnessed by the people I love. And so if I'm being witnessed during a hard time or a happy time, like doesn't matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like be around me when I'm suffering, and be around me when I'm happy too. But
Yeah.
I know that some people are more introverted and
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not introverted at all. I'm like, I want to tell everyone anything all the time.
Okay, well, speaking of telling everyone everything all the time, tell me more about this pregnancy or take me towards the birth. You said you were really sick. Did the sickness last to the end of pregnancy as it sometimes does? Or yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it totally did. Yeah, I think like I had so many interesting things come up. Like my palms had like rashes all over them and I was super itchy, like pretty much from 3 months on.
Mm-hmm.
And I, tried all different things. I wasn't being seen by anyone. So the
Mm-hmm.
intention when I first became pregnant was like, what am I going to do? I had known nothing about pregnancy. I've never looked into it. I've never been interested in it because I just never thought that I would be pregnant. So I was like, talking to whoever our insurance was through the school that I worked for. And they're like, well, the cheapest thing for you is like a hospital birth. And I was like, okay, well, I can get a midwife at a hospital. Like, that's the same thing. And so I like never had a visit because it was COVID. And I had a couple telehealth visits, talked to a lady on the phone for like literally 2 minutes, and I was a low risk pregnancy. And
Mm-hmm.
so I wasn't seen. So, like, I could call that pregnancy a wild pregnancy because I literally didn't have anyone. And then at around 37 weeks, I decided that I was going to leave teaching, that I like could not stand, going, because the idea was that next year was going to be all online again with COVID still being a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just like, I can't do another year of this with having a newborn baby. Like, I only get 6 weeks off. Like, it just,
Not enough.
yeah. So it was really hard for me to say goodbye to the class. But I did that. And then I was like, oh, shoot, I don't have insurance anymore. I need to figure out the cheapest way for me to give birth because giving birth in a hospital is not cheap without insurance. And so, yeah, I called every midwife at that time in Seattle, and 99.9% of them were either not doing home births or they were doing home births with masks,
Mm.
or your husband couldn't be or your partner couldn't be there, or it was like all of these regulations. And I was just like, I need to give birth with my partner there and I need to not be wearing a mask, and I'm not going to pay you to not come here. Like, that was also a thing, like, oh, if lockdown's happening, like, I won't show up. And I'm just
Uh,
like, well, I'm not going to pay you if you're not going to show up. And at that time I was just like, what's the big deal about this COVID stuff? Like, not wearing a mask, not getting vaccinated, et cetera, et cetera. So from pretty early on, I was just like, I'm not down for all of these rules and
mm-hmm.
such. And so, yeah, the one still to this day, the one beautiful angel midwife that like I'm still connected with to this day, her name's Cindy. I called her and I was like, hi, like, how much is it? And she's like, well, how much can you pay? And I was like, I literally just left my job. My husband doesn't have a job. Eric was like in between jobs as well, I remember. And I was like, well, like, what do you normally charge? She's like, I normally charge $900, but like, what about $400? And I'm just like, that sounds amazing.
Wow.
And then I'm like,
Wow.
but what are your rules for like masking and stuff? She's like, oh, you don't have to wear a mask. Like, your Eric can be there. And I was just
Mm.
like, literally, like, Love Day was bringing me this
No.
person. And I was just like, okay, because I had never even heard FreeBirth. Like,
Mm-hmm.
still, like, would have thought that that would have been really beautiful to have had a free birth with my first one. Had never even, like, I didn't have time to research anything, which is probably why I suffered so badly. I just didn't have enough time to, like, care for myself. I'd be like, oh, okay, magnesium. This person tells me to do this thing. Okay, like, I'll try that, but still super suffering with nausea. I was getting sick all day, every day, just throwing up. I gained so much water weight. I wish I had a picture. Like, literally from my knee to my ankle, it was like a tree trunk. It like went.
Oh my
Because
God.
Loveday was born in September, and after I decided to quit my job, I started a little day school. And so we went in the summer, but everyone was outside. And so I was out in the baking sun. It was like an especially hot summer too. And I was on my feet out in the sun all day, just getting super swollen.
Wow.
And yeah, anyways, so I found Cindy, and do you want me to roll into the birth?
Sure, sure. If you're ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do it. I was still really sick and actually had woken up with what I think still to this day is a little bit of food poisoning because we had eaten out at the night before at a place where I have like gotten food poisoning from before, but it's just so good, you know? Like poison me, I don't care. It's so delicious. But I woke up really early in the morning and was puking and pooping and just feeling like, man, just gonna sit here in the bathroom until it's all out of me. And then and so I did that. And then I went back to bed and I couldn't really fall asleep. And I was 2.5 weeks late. And Cindy
So you were like 42 weeks?
Yeah, 42 and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And afterwards, Cindy was just like, I bet that food poisoning kind of started your pregnancy or your birth.
Yeah, totally.
And so yeah, I ended up going through about 6.5 hours of labor. And of course, Cindy, you know, like almost every midwife is just like, oh, it's your first birth. Like, it's not going to go fast. Just like hunker down. And it's like a marathon, not a race, blah, blah, blah. But I was just like, I feel like this baby is coming soon. And she ended up getting there at about like 7 hours, and our road was like getting worked on. So they turned off our water. And I had like this big tub that someone gave me. Yeah, this like Cadillac of birthing tubs. And I like, you know, had filled it up with cold water and thought, okay, we'll just do boiling water in it. But I got in the tub and that didn't really do anything for me because it was cold. Even with the, you know, 4 pots of boiling water, it was like not reaching any. And then, so yeah, so then Cindy and her student came over, and her student is Angelica. I'm still in contact with Angelica too. She lives in Puerto Rico now.
Oh, wow.
She just sent me the best avocados ever. And I sent her some persimmons. I just, you know, all of these people, like, however much I might think that it could have been different or better if I would have like had a free birth, like I feel so grateful for the people that were there because they were very hands off and just let me do my thing. They showed up and were helpful with me getting in and out of the tub, and I essentially like was, you know, ready to give birth, but like Love Day was just like not coming down. You know, it's not that she was like stuck or whatever. It was just like I feel like I want to start pushing, but there's nothing there to push. And I like remember telling them that, and Cindy had me like lay on the bed with like my leg like this, and I'm like on my side, like going through like just breathing. And I think with both pregnancies, like I honestly didn't feel like pain. I feel like what I felt was like an intensity and like a fear around the intensity at times, especially in my first birth. But I just like hung out in that position for, I don't know, 20 minutes. And I hopped up on my fours and pushed Love Day out. Yeah. And I pushed too hard because I totally gave myself hemorrhoids and like a little bit of a prolapse. But that was like my, you know, which I still have a little bit of that left over for sure. But it's like, like, oh, you want me to push? Like, I'm gonna push. You know, I don't even know if she asked me to push, but that's again just like not having any idea of what birth is and like seeing birth or hearing about birth and thinking, oh, you push the baby out, you know?
Yeah. Had you ever, I imagine you probably hadn't seen another woman in person give birth. Did you watch videos or anything of other animals' birth or human birthing?
I like watched some. I didn't have time to like do it as much as I wanted. I know that like whenever I watched a birth, like on YouTube, like a home birth, especially after I knew I was having home birth and with Cindy and stuff. And she's like, oh, you should watch some like people birthing. And I'm like, okay. And I didn't have time to, still super busy with teaching, but I watched a couple and I just remember like crying so hard with each that like once it came to the baby actually coming out, I was like sobbing and like just having to like take space and like cry, you know?
Yes.
Which still to this day, if I like watch a birthing video, like I just start crying.
Yeah.
I can't help it, especially when the baby is like about to be there. I'm just like,
Yes. Okay. So you're on your bed on all fours, and that's how you birth her. She emerges from you.
Yeah.
Does anyone catch her? Does she just go to the bed
My
or
husband caught her. Yeah.
yeah.
He was right there, which it was so funny. As soon as she came out, she was just like, like making the weirdest little noises, like not crying and just really squirmy. Like,
Mhm.
get me out of here. Like, I've been kind of in this place, this tight squeeze for so long. And she was just really, and Eric was just kind of like, whoa. And like, I remember Cindy and Angelica like helped me onto my back and they just put her right on me. And I was just like, oh my God, like this is the most insane thing ever. Like, you just want to like jump on your roof and like holler to the world, like, how does everyone not talk about this only all of the time? Like, this is the most insane thing that has just happened. When you're pregnant, you feel like it's insane too, but there's so much suffering involved in the pregnancy. I don't think I really understood. Plus, it was the first time. I feel like with my second, I like understood. So any suffering that I went through during the pregnancy, at least I could like channel my energy towards knowing the beautiful gift that was at the end of this rainbow, you know? But
Mhm.
yeah, so she was put on my chest and yeah, it was so wild. She looked like my husband's baby pictures too, which is
Oh,
it's kind of cute to like birth your husband in a way, you know, like you yeah, have this like built-in best friend that's like a part of you and a part of them, and when you see them in your baby, I don't know, it just felt so endearing in that moment to like look at her and see him.
how sweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
And because you weren't very familiar with birth, like, did you think about or know about birthing your placenta, or like, how did that go for you?
No, I knew nothing. And honestly, like the onboarding with my midwife was like very minimal too, because I was so late, like getting to her at 37 weeks. And anything that we were doing together was like very much like in and out, you know, like fill in this paperwork, do this thing, blah, 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 because she has, you know, licensing stuff as a midwife and I hadn't had any care. So there were like a couple tests I had to take and blah, 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 which is just like so BS now. But like, anytime we were together, I mean, I loved her and I still love her, but it was just all business, you know? So it wasn't like, oh, hey, and this is what's going to happen or chit chatting, you know?
Yeah.
No idea. I mean, I knew that I had a placenta, but I didn't know. It's like, what's that going to be like? I never even really thought about it or about postpartum care, like with
Mhm.
hemorrhoids and with a prolapse and with all of this stuff and just not being able to like I mean, I did get up, which my second postpartum experience was so different, but I was like active within like the first 4 days. I was like, okay, I'm going to start running again. And the
No
worst ever. Yeah, I know, but I'm
time.
like so kinesthetic. Like I learned through doing. And so, yeah, I did a lot and I learned a lot and, did it differently the second time. But yeah, was really active because my husband was also in school. He's like, okay, like, I am going to go back to school for coding. So he did a coding boot camp and he was in school literally like 14 to 20 hours a day. And so I was like alone, no family. Yeah, we don't have any familial help.
Yeah.
So I just did it. But I mean, yeah, the bond between my daughter and I and my son and I, because we don't have any familial help, is like, just I feel so strongly connected with them, like energetically. And I just think that it was a lot of that battle within the postpartum times, you know, of like not having help. Like I literally, they were attached to me skin on skin 24 hours a day. Um, and I feel really grateful for that. Yeah.
Hmm.
I've
Yeah.
never had anyone else hold them except for their dad.
Wow. Yes. So sacred, really. Hmm.
Totally. Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share about your daughter's birth or that first, rite of passage from maiden into mother? Anything that really surprised you or that you wish other women would know?
That's a good question. I mean, definitely the prolapse thing. I hadn't ever heard of that. And
Hmm.
I mean, I'm still like working on it. I think it's, you know, the pelvic floor is such a beautiful and intricate and delicate space in our bodies that we don't ever, I mean, I never thought about it before. And that's where we birth from. And I did a lot of PT after and, have like healed it, but it affects you all the time. It's like you're sitting, you feel it. You're walking, you feel it. You're moving, you feel it. It's just this weird, eerie feeling of like, oh my God, are my organs literally going to come out from under me? So
Yeah.
I wish that I had known, like, oh, if you are up and moving too quickly and you don't give your time, like time for your body to contract and all of your organs like go back into their place, like by lying down, by using gravity, like this will very likely happen. And I've, yeah, in Village Prenatal, like talked to so many women who have had prolapses who like didn't even know what that was. Or I'm talking to them and they're like, oh, what's that? I'm like, okay, here you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and people don't know that there's like multiple different kinds of prolapse. Like you can have a urethral prolapse, or it can be,
your belly button
or your rectum. Like there's all these different possibilities. And yes, it's so important that we rest and keep our legs closed. And like you're saying, laying down.
Yeah.
And yet there isn't always the support to allow women to do that, unfortunately.
I know. Yeah. But, like I think that was one of my greatest lessons because pre becoming a mother, it was like I can push through anything, I can do anything. And I still am that way in a lot of aspects of my life. But that like transition into motherhood, like, and especially in being with my daughter and, her being upset or whatever, I'm like, I can't push through this. Like, how do I soften more? How do I relax more? How do I ground more? How do I do the opposite of like what I want to do or like what intellectually I think I should do? And like literally give into the feelings that she's having or give into, this difficult, challenging time that is staying up all night, with a newborn, all of these things. It just, yeah, I was really taught that, like surrender is so important because I had never really done that previously.
Yeah. And oftentimes, yeah, postpartum and just all that our babies need can like force us into that surrender.
Totally. Yeah.
Well, do you want to take us into your next conception and birth story?
Totally. So again, I carried that dang story about not being able to get pregnant again. And having been a teacher for so long, because before I was a Waldorf teacher, I was teaching public schools and art schools and stuff. So I'd been teaching for many, many years and known that I didn't want an only child. And so now I was like, oh, we're going to start trying as soon as we can because who knows how long it's going to take. And I started going back to acupuncture. And that's how I really do think that meeting my husband and also being an acupuncture, I think the two combined like helped with conceiving my daughter. And so I went back into acupuncture and told them that I was like hoping, like to be helped with my fertility. And it was about when my daughter was, I think she was around 2 that we conceived my son after trying for like, I think around since she was like 6 months old. But I still hadn't gotten my period back. I hadn't started bleeding yet. So, I never bled. She breastfed so much and my son breastfeeds so much. Like both of them could literally sustain life off of just breast milk.
Yeah.
They're like every 30 minutes, on the dot. But, so I was breastfeeding and I remember best memory ever being in the bathroom. Husband was at work and Loveday, she's 2. So she's like cognizant and she knew that like we were wanting to have a baby in my tummy. And she was really into the idea. She still like multiple times a day, Mom, when's the next baby coming down? Like, is there something I can do to help the next baby come down? Like she just loves babies and wants to add to our family. So I remember being in the bathroom and peeing, and we had taken many tests together and had them like, oh, what does that one say? Like, oh, that one, says we're not having a baby yet. And I remember reading it and it was positive. And I was just like, Love Day, like there's a baby in my tummy, and her just like completely like melting, in the best way possible, but like crying and screaming and like running around and so happy. It's like, oh my gosh, this is the best moment ever. And really, like his spirit was like there. I think some baby spirits, like Love Days, like it took a long time for hers to come in, even after she was born.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, I believe that incarnation takes a long time and in some cases, but I feel like with my son, he was like right there. He was like, "Oh, I'm ready to go." And I feel like there's another spirit baby that is like similarly like ready to go and around us. But yeah, during that time, I just remember feeling like he was already there, like celebrating with us. And yeah, so um I was pregnant with him. My pregnancy was actually a lot smoother because I was a lot more active, I think is part
Hmm.
of it, and not having the stress of COVID and all that stuff.
Were you throwing up again or no?
No,
Yeah.
nope, not nauseous, not sick. I mean, I felt a little bit nauseous at times, but I was not having 24-hour morning sickness where I was like
Mm-hmm.
throwing up and
Yeah,
stuff.
it's just interesting. My son, his pregnancy, yeah, I wasn't throwing up, but
Hmm.
daughters, I did. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So interesting. I think it's so cool, because every single pregnancy is absolutely different.
Yeah.
Even if there are some similarities you can find within women, it still is just
Mhm.
like always going to be so individualistic.
Always unique. Yeah.
Just the two of you. Yeah.
So in this pregnancy, you're not as nauseous. You're having a more easeful pregnancy. And is when you were pregnant, is that when like the concept or the possibility of birthing without a medical provider like came into your sphere of awareness?
Yeah. Well, so now, again, like, I hate to say that I'm like motivated by money, but I am like not into spending money unless I absolutely have to. So, choosing a midwife and a home birth, that was the cheapest option. That's how that came about, really, which thank God. And then this time I'm like, oh, okay, Cindy's prices have gone up and I can't afford $1,200. And I'm going to call every other midwife. And actually, she, a couple months later, had decided that she wasn't going to be attending births anymore. So that kind of ruled her out anyways. But I was like, oh, and I was a doula at this time too, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
So I had like
Yeah.
met lots of midwives, known pricing, never heard of FreeBirth still at this time. Even,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was like a doula in hospital, like not
Yeah.
in some home births, but more often hospital.
Yeah,
And
I can relate. I was a birth worker and attending births with midwives as a midwife assistant for a number of years before I even like heard the concept of free birth, and then it all sort of like peeled away. But yeah.
totally. It's like being in a candy store and having somebody talk about broccoli, like it's not happening.
Yes, I mean, but at first I was like, ooh, is that, legal? Do women get in trouble? Are they allowed to do that? But then also funny because then I remember then later being like, yeah, but my own grandmother birthed my mom without anyone present. It wasn't planned, but
Totally.
that is in me. And yet I didn't even think about that as being a possibility.
I feel like it's like, oh my God, like that's not a free birth. That's like scary town. Like that's Fearville. Do not even think about like that would be the worst case scenario. Like that was, and it was never called a free birth. Like I feel like if I had even heard free birth, like once I did hear that free birth, I was just like, oh, I'm going to learn all about that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, being in hospital and being around and doing birth work for like around a year and a half, I was just like, oh, okay, I'm just going to have another midwife. So let me go down all the lists of midwives that I haven't met that will come to me in my area, blah, blah, blah. They're all really expensive, I really didn't want to do any testing. I like knew that I just wanted to have as hands off as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing, the big aspect that I was most like, I wouldn't say concerned, but curious about with midwives is like, how would their licensing work around letting me go late?
Mm-hmm.
Because my daughter was 2.5 weeks late, and Cindy was like, cool, great. Like, your baby has their own time. But I knew from working, with other midwives that like 41 weeks and we're going to transfer you. And I'm like, I don't want to be transferred. There's no way I'm going to be transferred. So like figuring out, which midwives in Seattle like would transfer at different times and their comfortability level. And I was just like, so I like went through like half my pregnancy kind of doing a little bit of research and blah, 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 blah. And I reached out to one of my friends and I was like, hey, do you know any other midwives like working under the table or whatever? And she's like, oh no, but one of my friends is like really connected in the birth world. There's this thing called Village Prenatal that she goes to pretty often. And I'm like, oh, cool. That sounds sweet, like a circle of women. And so I ended up meeting my friend's friend and we became friends. And I started going to Village Prenatal. And I was like, oh my God, like, what is this? Like, no one has anyone at their birth. Like, that sounds actually amazing. Like, I am an extroverted person, but just not having anyone else's expectations on me because I am very empathetic and will glom on to other people's feelings and often process them myself. I'm just like, I don't have to have that, you know?
Hmm.
And so, yeah, after going to Village Prenatal, I think starting at maybe like around 4 months or something, and I went to like every single one until I gave birth. But I slowly became, as I heard birth stories and as I heard of other people's fears, even, and the one really important step that I took during my pregnancy was at Village Prenatal to just be like, my baby could die. And I have to be totally comfortable with that, whether I have a free birth or whether I have a hospital birth or a midwife. Like, I didn't come to that place in my first pregnancy. And I knew that, like, if I was going to take full responsibility of this birth and of this baby, like, I had to also look at that side of things. And I remember doing that and just crying at Village Prenatal and just having this huge release. And it was like after that moment that I was like, oh, yeah, we're doing a free birth. Like, I don't need to talk to any more midwife that comes out of the woodwork. Like, I'm totally here for myself. And it felt really secure and really safe and really, yeah, beautiful.
Hmm.
Yeah. And he was actually a week early, which was crazy.
Yeah, you never know, like patterns, just babies do different things, you know?
Totally. And I will say in this pregnancy, like my daughter's pregnancy was really about like me healing and connecting to myself. I was really afraid of having a girl because of my relationship with my mom and because I was like really picked on when I was growing up at school by girls. And I just have always had guy friends. I don't anymore, which I'm so glad I like healed that part of myself, but like played in a band, skateboarded, did drugs, all boys all the time, and got picked on by girls only. And yeah, it was just, I had that story. And so having my daughter, even hearing that she was a girl, when we did our like, when we found out the gender, which I didn't do in my second pregnancy, but I did in my first, I was like crying. I was like, wow, I can't have a girl. But yeah, I, in my second pregnancy was like, this is just going to be so different. It feels so different. It was all about being connected to like the cosmos and to my ancestors. And it wasn't about like me being connected to myself and healing anymore. It was like really about branching out and feeling into who all is here, for me to converse with, for me to be supported by, for me to have connection with.
Mhm.
And my grandpa's birthday is on December 16th, and my grandpa is still like my very best friend and was just growing up. He's like really the one who raised me the most out of everyone, my grandma and my grandpa on my dad's side. And so yeah, his birthday was on the 16th and my son was born on the 18th. On like the morning, I like went into labor and I just like knew that it was my grandpa being like, here's your Sagittarius, because I was like so afraid of having a Capricorn, to be honest. No offense to any Capricorns out there, but
I've got a quadruple Capricorn sun here.
oh, whoa. Like, I think their energy is so beautiful. And in my experience, like Geminis and Capricorns, like I just was worried about the compatibility, So,
Totally.
and his due date was on Christmas Day, which is
Uh-huh.
interesting. My daughter was conceived on Christmas Day, and he was like supposed to come on Christmas Day or like around then. but he
Wow.
came a little early. So, and I like knew that my grandpa was here, and I like could feel him and just everyone, like who had passed or past lives. I had like a really big run-in with like someone's sister that I knew that was actually at a village prenatal who is a medium or very gifted intuitively and like told me all about my family and my past life and how they're, it was just like that moment. My intellectual like needed something like that because I could feel it, but it was like once I was tapped in intellectually, I was like, okay, like this
Mm.
is real. I'm not making it up. And then, yeah, really just got connected in that pregnancy to all of them. And yeah, my son came through. I didn't actually even know that I was like I was in labor. I
No.
started, do you want me to tell the story now?
Yeah, please.
Okay. It's a really fun story because working with that friend that I told you that I'd met, the friend of a friend, her
Mhm.
name's Amy. She was going to be present at my birth. I was like, I would like to have somebody there. And you seem like a beautiful person to have at my birth. And so we like went back and forth with like manifesting what that might look like. And I had written in this little book about what I wanted my birth to be like, just like any other day. Like I would just wake up and like literally give birth to the baby. And I would be doing chores and things, around the house meanwhile, and which is like opposite I know of like what other people might want for their birth, but like that's just I like love that. I'm just like I want it to be like any other day. And it totally was. I like woke up and I was like, huh, like I don't feel tired anymore. Like I feel totally awake. And I remember walking down our long stairs being like, whoa, I can like he was so low the whole pregnancy. It was just hard for me to like that was my only complaint really. Yeah. I was just like having a hard time like moving around, like walking. I just felt like his head was like engaged like for the entire last like 3 months. So I was like running down the stairs, like, whoa, I feel really light. I feel really good. Like, while I feel this good, I'm gonna like move around all of the wood because my husband was in charge of kind of the wood stove. We have the wood stove in the greenhouse that we have to keep going all winter long so that the plants stay warm enough.
Mm.
And he's not an organized person, and I'm a very organized person. So I like organized 6 cords of wood during this time, moving it all around. It took me like 4 hours. I'm like moving around wood, moving around plants in the greenhouse because some of them were getting burnt next to the wood stove, blah, blah, blah. And then I remember like Love Day and my husband were sleeping in the house together in a separate bed because in both pregnancies, have had like a very, like I've had pregnancy insomnia a little bit and would just sleep alone some nights when I couldn't sleep. And so they were off in another, and they didn't wake up until like 11. And he like comes out in his underwear, his hair is all like, and he's like, did you have the baby? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not even in labor. Like, you're such an idiot. Like, you don't put any of the wood in the correct place. I'm like getting mad at him. And he's like, oh, okay, well, like, I'll get dressed and I'll come out and give you some help. And so they came out and we're like moving wood around and moving plants around. And he's like, oh, we got to get the tub ready because you could be giving birth in the next month. And if you want to be in the tub, we got to make sure, blow it up, make sure it doesn't have any air holes, blah, blah, blah. So he starts blowing up, realizes that he needs a part from Home Depot. So him and Loveday go to Home Depot. And then my original friend who introduced me to Amy, who introduced me to Village Prenatal, calls me and we spend like an hour on the phone and talk about like, shitty, poor dating life, in 2023 or whatever this was. I'm just like hearing about her trials and tribulations and like, oh, dude, like I got you. Like, oh man, like, empathizing with this story she's telling me. And during that phone call, I was like, I'm feeling like if I'm still, like I'm not comfortable, but like not thinking I'm in labor still. And so we like hang up the phone. My sister was coming over to take Love Day to do something so we could get some stuff done in the house because I'm like massive nester, I'm like, okay, we got to have the entire house painted before I like give birth, or I was like painting the cabinets or something, I can't remember. But so he comes home with the part, they blow up the tub, I get in the tub, I'm like, oh, this will be cool, this will be good, whatever. And my sister takes Love Day and Eric's like, do you want me to fill up the tub? And I'm like, no, like, I don't want to waste all of that water. And he's like, okay. I'm like, but taking a bath really does sound good right now. And I had like I would like text with Amy almost every day, and I was like texting her in the morning and like, oh, hey, what's up? Blah, 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 blah. She's like, oh, I'm gonna swing by. Like, it kind of sounds like there's something going on. I'm just gonna swing by. So she like rides her bike. She like shows up, just as Eric's filling the bath. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna get in the bath. Like, that sounds so good. Like, Amy's gonna make me some tea. And I drink elderflower tea. And I remember being like, whoa, like I'm feeling something. Like I'm in the portal, Like I'm tripping on something right now. I'm in this tub, like I have this immense amount of intensity coming through, really felt super cosmic. And I was just like, this doesn't feel like an ordinary, I mean, it was an ordinary day, but it didn't feel like in that moment, like I'm just taking a bath. And I remember Amy started reading my manifestation of my birth, like in this little notebook. She starts reading it, and I'm like, this is literally everything that I said it was going to be, down to like the most minute detail. And I'm just like, whoa. And then I felt my body push. And I'm just like, whoa, my body is pushing. And I remember holding onto the sides, like, whoa, like, should I stop my body from pushing? Like, it just felt, ah. And my body did it twice, maybe. And then I heard this pop, and I was like, oh my God, my water just broke. Like, I'm starting labor right now. I'm like, yes, like, oh my gosh, my son is going to be born soon, or my baby. I didn't know it was a boy or a girl, but it's like, my baby's going to be born soon. Like, oh my gosh. I knew that he was a boy too, I should mention.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just like knew he was a
Yeah.
boy. I had like seen images, and when I was talking to the medium too, like, she's like, I see him playing, which is so crazy that everything that she described for him to be like is exactly how he's like. And she was like describing him, and I was just like, oh, that sounds like a little boy. Like that sounds like who I am envisioning also. And it's just a masculine energy. But so I'm like, but I was like, because I had been fooled, not fooled, but I had been like thinking that my daughter was a boy and she was a she. And so I was like, oh, I'm probably wrong about this. And my daughter had been like, it's a sister the whole time. And my daughter is like, it's a girl and her name's gonna be Dearest. And it's funny as my boy, yeah, his name is Dearness. Dearness, but we call him Arnie because Arnie's in the middle of the word dearness. And Arnie's my grandpa's name. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so she was like, it's a girl, it's a girl. So I was like, sure, that my baby was a girl. But anyways, so I'm like, okay, like that was crazy. My water just broke, and oh my gosh, my body is pushing again, after about 30 seconds or whatever. So boom, my body pushes again, and out pops his whole head. I was like, what? Like, how did that just happen? I didn't even know that I was in labor, let alone like going to give birth, like right now. And my water broke, and that was surprising enough. And now I have a whole, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And my husband like reaches his hand down, and he's like, oh my gosh, is he okay? I'm like, do I just hang out here? Like, am I just gonna wait for the next? So I did. But he said that he put his hand down there. He's like, whoa, he's licking my hand. Because I was like, is he okay? Like, is everything okay? It was so sudden. And so I was so shocked, like, most shocking moment of my entire life. And
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, he's okay. He's licking my hand. So he just held his head, kind of, gave his head a little bit of support. And then next time my body pushed, out came his whole entire body. And I just lifted him up on my chest. So yeah, he was birthed in our tub.
In your regular tub.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have a
Awesome.
clawfoot little. It's a shorty actually. It's like under 5 feet clawfoot
Mm-hmm.
tub, but
Big
yeah,
enough.
yeah, it was perfect. It was awesome.
Yeah. My son also was born in our regular bathtub, not in like the birthing pool. So
Yeah,
parallels.
totally.
Yes. Okay. So he's
Yeah,
there.
so I'm holding him. It was actually such a blessing because I forgot to mention I'd re-injured my tailbone with my daughter being on all fours. I had broken my tailbone playing soccer. Someone had actually kicked me in the tailbone. I know, when I was sitting. it was a slide tackle or something, I can't remember, but I had broken my tailbone, and then I re-broke it when I gave birth to my daughter, and it was so painful. It was like the reason why I was up and about so much, because sitting or laying was super painful.
Yeah.
Um, and I had to get like internal adjustments. And anyways, I didn't want to have to go through that again. So being on the tub and having it support my tailbone as he was, descending, I
Mm-hmm.
think was really helpful, and not because I didn't re-injure
Yeah.
that injury.
And was your daughter there when he emerged?
Yes,
Or...
she just came home. It's so cute. She was wearing, it wasn't Halloween because, it's December 18th, but she was wearing a clown costume with a little clown like collar, and her hair was in pigtails, and she had little like cheeks drawn, like her and my sister were doing something. And yeah, she just like, I remember she like runs in, her like pigtails and like everything is flopping around, her little like costume. And she's like, oh my gosh, like this is insane. I don't know exactly what she said, but it was like, that was the energy. Like, this is insane. Like, this is so exciting. Yeah.
Wow. Yes. And this time,
And
oh yeah.
I was gonna say, and I like looked and saw like right there as she came in, because it was like within seconds of him being
Uh-huh.
born, her coming in, my sister coming in, we're all in this like 10 square foot bathroom, and I'm like going down to look at him. I'm like, oh my God, it's a boy. Like, my body grew a boy.
A little teeny tiny penis.
I was right. I know, the little tiny balls. I was just like, oh my God, like, what is that? Like, that's not a vagina. Oh my God, it's a boy. So yeah, and then I'm being like, it's a boy. Like, my friend Amy did do one little tiny recording, because even though I'm a photographer, like, I don't like being photographed. I don't like being recorded. Like, I want to be as in the present moment, as authentic as I possibly can be. And I feel like when I have a camera on me, it's just in my psyche or in my system. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, I have this one little tiny, and it was just right after he came out, and I looked with Love Day there and was like, it's a boy. And I just was like, my eyes were like wide, like, what? Like in disbelief, because I was like, oh, my daughter has to be right. She's been saying it's a girl the entire time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. I was just gonna ask, so this time you didn't have a midwife there and you had your placenta, and like, so then how was his placental birth, and did you separate him from his placenta, or how did, as we
I
wrap
know. With
here?
my daughter, I'd wanted to do a lotus birth, but
Mm-hmm.
didn't, because I wanted to consume my placenta more than I wanted to have a lotus birth. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought with my son, I would do a lotus birth. And, but then again, I was like, I want to eat it. Like, I
Yeah.
have this feeling like I want to eat it, which, yeah, I just honored that, and made
Mm-hmm.
my husband like clean it and cut it. And I had done so much placental work,
Yeah.
putting it into capsules or just putting it into powders or whatever for like other clients that I had.
Mm-hmm.
So I had like, it down, and just told him exactly what to do. We had a dehydrator out already, blah, blah, blah. But I got up from the tub, I went to bed, and it actually took a little while longer than my first with my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like maybe like 3 or 4 hours. And I was like just very content with having him attached and with my placenta inside. And he actually had a really short cord. My daughter's cord was so long that we went for as long as we could. I think with hers, she stayed attached for like 4 hours, something like that. And he was attached for maybe like 3 to 4 hours. And then I was just like, I really want this placenta out now. I'm like ready to kind of complete and bring conclusion to this
Mm-hmm.
time. And so, yeah, I got up and I walked to the bathroom, and I remember Amy had put a bowl in the toilet for me, and I just like sat on, and it just went plop. And then being such a ditz, this is like just the most cringiest thing I can think about. I'll think about it every once in a while, like, like a car accident or something. It just triggers I'm like, why did I do this? I like get up. My son is still attached to the placenta, but I like stand up thinking that like, and then my placenta like comes out of the toilet and then flops on the floor. And I'm just like, oh my God, okay, yes. Like, reorient myself to reality here. I am like still in the portal and very much like in dream world.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then we stayed attached for a little while longer because I was still just like, maybe I want to do a lotus birth. And I was like, once I saw the thing, I was like, I want to eat that. So yeah, we ended up cutting, I think like again, like 4 or 5 hours after
Hmm.
birth. And yeah, I ended up putting it into a powder and consumed it. And I feel like it was really helpful. I'm also vegan, so that could be, why too. Just needed that extra like iron and
Yeah.
nutrients in the placenta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're sort of at the time of when we said we would conclude, and I want to honor that. And I see that, yes, we're also, the sun is setting here.
I know, right? I'm like in the dark greenhouse.
Yeah, it's kind of cool though. Got to see the light fade.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to say or share before you? Then I also want you to tell people all
Oh
the
yeah.
multiple talents that you have and offerings in the world. But
Oh yeah, thanks. I mean, yeah. I appreciate being able to like talk about all this. It's so fun to relive it and to think about it because I think, yeah, these stories are like really beautiful and do have a life of their own. And we often forget about them, I think, in the midst of like raising children because there are literally a million stories that happen every single day. But I think it's always beautiful. And being a Waldorf teacher, hearing so many birth stories, because that would be a part of what we would do as teachers is do home visits, hear about birth stories, hear about how the pregnancy was, et cetera, et cetera. Like that spirit that lives in that birth with you as you're birthing as the parent, and that spirit that is like innately alive during the birth is the baby. Like that is their personality. That is like what they carry forth with them into this world. And it's just cool to remember like that being my first introduction or experience with them on this earth together. And like, how did that go? Like, what was that like? Like, my son is really easygoing. Like it's just cool to think about and just to be reminded of it. So I appreciate getting to talk about both of their birth stories.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to receive them. And I love all the wisdom sprinkled in and just how unique each, birth is like so beautiful in its uniqueness. Like everyone is different, and yet also it's like the same things occur too.
Totally.
Yes. So you're in the Seattle area. You're a photographer, a florist. You were in a band. You do village prenatals for any mamas or women wanting to conceive in the Seattle area. Village prenatals happen once a month, right?
Yeah, they happen. Yeah, the last Sunday of each month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they're 4 hours long, 11 to 3. So we get like really good, juicy time. I bring Qigong. I studied Qigong for a long time. So I bring Qigong and I have a full set of singing bowls and tuning forks and things. So I do a sound bath for Village Prenatal each last Sunday of the month and a meditation. And then we also hear a birth story from another mother in the community that are most of them are free birth stories, but every once in a while there'll be a home birth with a midwife, something like that.
Yeah, beautiful. Well,
Yeah, and I shoot all film. I do photography, and then we have our greenhouse, which I work out of a lot as my studio. But it's a venue for folks, for other photographers, or we have weddings here pretty often. Yeah, it's a really sweet space. And then floral arrangement. I have my
hydrosols, right?
I make hydrosol. So I don't know if you can see, but
it is showing up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you hand painted or hand drew that on the bottle?
Yeah. I'm doing them by hand now until I get the supplies. I want to do like a little rubber stamp because I went to school for printmaking, and so I know how to do, I can print my own labels. I don't have to hand draw each one.
Sure.
But until I get my logo down to a place where I like it, because everything's a little bit different. There's like slight variations. I got to find the variation that I like the most, and then I'll go with that. But my company is Divine Form.
Divine Form.
The company, yeah. Mm-hmm. And hydrosols, tensor rings. I do plant dyed silks and silk accessories like headbands and scrunchies. I have, it's kind of hard to see now, but
yeah,
All dyed with
Gorgeous.
plants. And sheepskins too. I like have been
Aw.
plant dyeing sheepskins, like blue and pink and green.
How fun.
Yeah. All with
Yeah.
plants and flower
Well,
essences too.
yes. Well, I'll put links to everything that you share with me in the show notes. And yeah, I'm excited to share this episode. I know women will relate and connect.
Cool. Thanks for having this. It's so fun.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening, my dearest beloveds. If you are feeling a resonance with me, I would absolutely love to work with you one-on-one or in one of my group circles that are exclusively for women. I have offerings for preparing for birth, for guidance in mothering. I do birth trauma debriefs for you to integrate and heal challenging birth experiences. I have intuitive offerings such as mediumship readings and energy healing. I offer guidance in grief, death, and celebrant services. And if meeting one-to-one feels like too much, please join my full moon birth circle or my new moon death grief circle. If you haven't already, I would love for you to take a moment to just rate, review, or share the show with somebody that you know. If you want to share your story on the Heart of the Soul or have a desired topic suggestion, please reach out to me through email. And as always, remember that we are co-creators of the world that we want to live in for ourselves and for the generations to come. Until next time, be brave, be bold, be love, be you.